This is the MO Sessions podcast, where we talk about magic ways to become a better magician to be good to your magic. I'm your host, Benny Slade, and I couldn't be any more thrilled that you are here. This episode will discuss sharing secrets, a great note of mine from a conversation I had with a buddy of mine, Nathan Colwell, and a few other items, including some books I've read recently that I think you should check out. In the last couple of weeks, I really thought about what sharing secrets and gatekeeping really mean. I've gotten a lot of flack over the past year about me being very vocal about my thoughts on gatekeeping, and I want to share an experience with you I had with a buddy of mine, Nathan Colwell, who is a magician who is now based out of Chicago. And he and I were talking over Instagram, and he was sharing his experiences. I had asked him because it's been bothering me that I was getting so much flack over being so vocal about gatekeeping. And I'd like to share his experience with that and his thoughts on it, because it makes sense, and then I'll go from there. I had asked him, what are his thoughts on gatekeeping? What are his thoughts about sharing secrets? And this is what he had to say. He said, "I think magic has a tendency toward elitism and protects secrets out of ego rather than a tool to improve the art. I'm especially bothered by the ways people are locked out by class and jargon. Valuable secrets that could improve the art are locked behind out-of-print books at high costs. And books are often written inaccessibly with jargon that requires heavy experience in reading technical manuals, especially magic ones in particular." And I thought that was really interesting. And then he went on to say something that I just was not expecting. He said, "When I was a young and starting in magic, I was an autistic kid who grew up in the rural South. I had no access to community and learned everything I did from library books and what half-missing kits I could find for cheap at the AMVETs. I was lucky in that I had a lot of time to read and have a natural inclination to technical reading, but without that, I would not have been able to engage with magic." And then I kind of was just stunned by that, because I just didn't know how to respond to that. Me and Nathan just was corresponding about something else in that conversation, and it got very personal very quickly, and I was excited for him to share that experience with me. He did want to clarify to me that he was a poor autistic kid. He said, "Everything I learned was because someone took action to make magic accessible outside of the insular community." I said, interesting, because I'm absorbing this whole thing, right? He said, "And I don't want to contribute to magic locking away its secrets, especially to particular secrets with specific visions for magic. Magic is for everyone, and there shouldn't be any gatekeepers." He went on to say, "I largely think that what's missing isn't necessarily secrets so much as respect for the secrets and their use." So this is where it got really interesting for me, because at this point, it was just kind of like we're in the rabbit hole, we're going down the rabbit hole on this conversation. And I had stated to him, I believe in mentorship and working your way through magic. He says, "I have access to secrets in, say, stage illusions, but I don't pursue them because I understand my role in a relationship to them is not to know." And I thought that was really powerful. And as I'm reading and sharing this with you, I'm also rethinking about this whole thing, because it's deep. And this is what changed it for me. Like, this is that pivot moment for me where I really realized he's right. And that's kind of the way. And I had been talking to a few other magicians, who had shared very similar thoughts, not experiences, but thoughts on the whole thing. And what he says next is what really kind of finished the hammering of the nail and cemented it for me. He said, what's missing is a culture of responsibility. Learning a secret means taking a stewardship over it. And he went on to say, there's an interview with an environmentalist I was listening to yesterday that I'm kind of borrowing from here. He said, and Nathan went on to say, paraphrasing heavily, when indigenous groups would take fish from a river, they knew that their consumption made them responsible for the preservation of the fish in that river. To consume the flesh of another makes you responsible for continuation of the community of the consumed. The problem isn't that we consume things from the environment, but that we feel we can escape the responsibility we take on by doing so. I was arguing with a man who said that because I bought toilet paper, I was just as responsible for deforestation as the CEO of Weyerhaeuser. I'm assuming that's a company. I'm culpable not because I use toilet paper, but because I don't stop Weyerhaeuser from deforesting, which is a much greater sin. I consume the flesh of the tree and I let the forest die. Nathan said after heavily quoting that, loosely quoting it, I think that's a good way to think of trade secrets. To participate in magic means taking on responsibility for the health of the magic ecosystem. And you can harvest its secrets, but you are now responsible for the preservation of magic secrets. And that's what changed the whole thing for me. He sent that to me and I stopped. I stopped in my tracks, whatever I was doing. And that was the key to the whole thing. And the baffling thing about it was that something that I found so complicated, complex to analyze and break apart and figure it out, as to a magician telling me that magicians think of themselves as artists, but artists have a community to support those artists, and magic does not in the way that we deserve. And what's right. And that kind of threw me for a loop as well. Nathan didn't tell me that. Another magician told me that, who is very well known in the industry. And I heard so many similar things to what I was saying, but I was missing the conclusion of the problem I had with it is that there was a piece missing that was like, well, what about, the younger generation of magicians? And you've heard me talk about it before on this podcast that I don't think magic, I think now we're seeing a pivot, a very small pivot, but there was no pivot for younger magicians to, like, the older magicians didn't pass it on like the older magicians did to their generation and so much forth. I really take magic, as, I don't know how to word it. I take it passionately. I do believe that it should be something that is mentored down. I mean, I guess I'm this way because I went to barbering college, and the instructors there were older men because they were experienced and they knew what they were talking about. So it's really interesting for me to think about barbering and how I had gone through school and finished school. And, there were some kids I went to school with who called themselves a master barber. And I just considered myself a barber because after I finished school, I never pursued a career in it. So when you think of the terms like master magician, I do think we are an industry that deserves those titles, that deserves the respect and the heritage that that came before us. And so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to Nathan, and we're having this conversation, and he goes on to say some more things. He says, I think it depends on what you are performing and how you define a healthy magic ecosystem. I've deliberately cited heavily in my posts online because the concern I have is that the magic community has no understanding of its past. Someone who is concerned magic is sick because it doesn't abandon the past to move bravely into the future would perform differently. So we were having some small conversation on the in-between, and I thought about it. It had been a week since I talked to Nathan, and I asked him if I could share our conversation with you guys, and he agreed. And he wanted to clarify one thing. And I'll read you what he sent to me. And he said, the only thing I'll clarify is a distinction between definite and general secrets. The specific secrets are what you harvest and use. A double lift, a back palm, etc. The general secrets are what you have, a responsibility toward, the ability of magicians to perform deceptive magic. To use the analogy of a fish in a river, it's not a specific fish that you take responsibility for, but instead the entire class of fish in the river. So it's not that you're beholden to the protection of a particular secret, although that often goes hand in hand, but the protection of our ability to fool people. So as if I wasn't more blown away. And Nathan is incredible. We had a conversation, multiple conversations about Marlowe. I'm obsessed is a little bit of a cringy word to say, but I find Marlowe fascinating all the way around. And I'm lucky enough to have Steve Reynolds as a friend, and now speaking with Nathan Colwell, I consider him a peer. And it's interesting to hear other peers of mine in this industry share their thoughts on things like this. Forget about, the magic and whatnot. When in terms of sharing secrets and sessioning and things like that. When I ask questions, because I love asking questions, the only way you find out information is if you ask questions. That's what I was always told. And taking responsibility in magic is a constant, I'm just really rethinking and reliving the whole conversation with Nathan. And that's what I wanted to share with you guys, is that I believe that. I do believe that as a magician, we have a responsibility to give back and to foster an ecosystem that's healthy, a magic ecosystem. And just the wording was really good too, like ecosystem, environment. These are all words, responsibility, stewardship. These are all words that the meaning behind them does apply 1,000% to magic. I was talking to a magician who I'm not going to disclose only because I don't have their permission, but what I will say is that I was discussing with a magician this very similar thing about gatekeeping and stewardship. And their simple answer was pretty much, the information is out there. And that it's not quoting him, it's not his responsibility to pass on the history of secrets, magic, what have you. It's gatekeeping with an open door. He said he's not going to share the hush hush magic, as it's called, with just anybody. But the hush hush magic information is out there. And I thought that was interesting, and I kind of agreed with it. But at the same time, I still have a hard time sharing my magic with other magicians. I don't see a reason why, unless you're developing an act or you're asking or you want to learn something. Why would you share your repertoire with other magicians other than for learning? And that I'll probably get a lot of flack for that too. But I think sessioning is great if you're looking for something and you're just wanting to hang out. But for someone, you know what? Let me clarify all of that. If you're sessioning with someone, I think it's great that you kind of are talking about magic tricks that are whatever. It's just whatever. It's an open dialogue of magic tricks and effects and things like that. But I think when it comes down to, let's say, so-and-so magicians who's been on tour or whatever, and they have that one effect in their repertoire that's just killer. Let's just say it's card to envelope, Grippo style. And you finally get to session with them and sit down with them, and all you ask is about that effect. They're not going to show it to you. I don't know how else to word that. I just don't think there's certain secrets you share and certain secrets you don't. But Nathan really cleared out that haze for me. You can even hear me trying to explain it. It's very hazy. It's not very clear. But Nathan really cut through it like a hot knife through butter. He made it very clear. And I appreciate that. And just so you guys know, when I asked Nathan, he very kindly agreed that I could share this. And Nathan, if you're listening, I really appreciate that, because that was a pivoting moment for me that I didn't know how else to word it. And I got a lot of negative responses that were just and it was very gatekeeping and closed off, where it was secrets are secrets and they're not deserved to be shared. And I think the funny thing about talking to magicians is you have to be careful about what I call magic politics. You don't want to get intertwined with the magic politics, but at the same time, it's a fine line between magic politics and getting information from magicians and deciding to make your own decisions and what you believe in. And not just hearing it from one magician and saying, yeah, that's all right. I don't do that. And I don't advise for my listeners to do that either. I think it's really important to listen to the old guys, the young guys, and everything in between. I listen to some of these young cats and what they're talking about, with magic, and some of these guys baffle me because they don't even know who Di Vernon is. Some of them. Not all of them, but some of them. They don't know who Martin Nash is, Slidini, Gene Mays. They just don't know who these people are. And it really baffles me. These days I find myself becoming, what's the word? Some of my friends call it a wizard. Not in the sense of... No, actually, in the sense of a wizard. I meditate and I mediate my thoughts on magic, and I think about them to be better on my thinking of magic and how to make it better, along with practicing magic that matters and doing better magic. I think that's really important. I think that's just the path I'm on, and I wanted to share this little excerpt with you. I do want to share also, before I close out this episode, that I picked up, I'm a little behind on it, but I picked up the Books of Wonder. I don't know if I talked about it on my last episode, but I picked up the Books of Wonder, and a lot of my feelings and thoughts are in the Books of Wonder, which I thought were really interesting. I also highly recommend Signing up for Way of the Wizards is a online convention held by Paul Vigil, Jared Kopf, and Mike Peixoto. And I attended the last one when Michael Weber was the guest of honor, and it was incredible. If that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend going to thewayofthewizards.com, and I don't think there's an S. I think it's just thewayofthewizard.com, and checking that out. Mike Peixoto had advertised a couple of his booklets, which I had picked up before the convention. And incredible little booklets. I think there's like 4 or 5 effects. I think his newest one has 6 effects in there, but incredible. I wanted to share that with you. I'll be sharing some suggestions here and there. And thank you for listening to this episode and sticking around. And if this is something that you like, please send me an email with maybe episode suggestions and more. Thank you so much. See you on the next episode. We did it. We made it to the end of the podcast. Your attention means the world to me. Thank you for sticking it out the whole episode. I hope you learned something from this episode. If you would like to learn more or donate to our podcast, head over to our Patreon, where you can find some magic education, essays, thoughts of mine, and other shared content. I have a growing Instagram where you can correspond with me, as well as a growing Twitter where we can host live events. The Patreon I work really hard on to give you a good amount of content, enough to share and learn without overloading you with magic, so you can become a better magician. Continue down the rabbit hole and do better magic. And remember to leave magic better than you found it.